Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Ag View Pitch. Today, we have a special interview with a new consultant with Ag View Solutions, Jeremy Doetch. How are you today?
I'm great today, Shay. Glad to be a part of it. My life's just changed and changed for the better.
That's awesome. We're going to get into some more detailed outlook of your role here with Ag View. But where I'd really like to start, Jeremy, is just give the listeners, a 2 minute overview of who are you, where are you located, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Well, I'm located in Northern Illinois. Poplar Grove, Illinois is the actual zip code, but there was a little town where I grew up by the name of Blaine, and so it's not even a map dot anymore. It doesn't have its zip code anymore, but I guess the Stagecoach Trail went through there. So, from nostalgia purposes, sometimes I like to say I'm from Blaine, Illinois, and see how many people, raise their eyebrows and go, "Where the heck is that?" But it sits up in a little pocket, kind of northeast of Rockford. I farm about 2 miles from the Wisconsin state line, so you could almost call me a cheesehead, but I'm not really quite a cheesehead. But we're on a grain farm here. Our farm's been through quite a few different changes. I'm third generation. My grandparents moved up here from Southern Illinois and started this farm. My dad took it over in the mid 90s when my grandfather passed with a heart attack. Um, I've come back into the farm. One of the great things that AgView has allowed me to do is to be a part of the farm and be a part of something that I've built a career on building on the finance side, and so I'm blessed on doing that. But my dad, he's getting to the point where he's slowing down. Third generation's coming in. The fourth generation, my oldest son, is going to be a senior at UW Platteville and wants to come back to the farm. So we're excited to keep the farm going. Like I said, it's a grain farm. We do a lot of row crops, just mainly soybeans and corn, a little bit of wheat every now and then. When it makes sense for us. Sometimes it doesn't always make sense.
Right, right.
But we do that, and then we've got a hog finishing business where we finish hogs for an integrator. And that's really the farm. We've been bigger, we've been smaller. We're in a little bit of a transition period at this point in time. But that's kind of my role on the farm on how to take it to the next direction. And I'm lucky to be a part of AgView because prior to being on the farm, I've been 23 or 24 years in the finance world, where I started off. After I graduated from college, I started off in the investment world, and then went into the banking world, and I've been really a agricultural lender, in doing that for probably 20 of those 23 years. So, last Friday was my last day at the bank. I can officially say I'm a recovering banker. I know it's been, time that, I've been on the AgView pitch before and have worked with a couple people on how to, position themselves with their bank or getting another set of eyes on some financials. And I'm looking forward to be a part of that with AgView and bring that perspective. And just really glad and blessed that you guys have you've been open to it. Married with two kids. I've been married. Shoot, she's gonna kill me if she listens to this. It'd be 23, yeah, 23 years of marriage. I get a heck of a wife. She's a teacher, men's basketball coach, a heck of an athlete. I mean, she's just my best friend. And two boys. I've mentioned Will, the older one that's coming back, and then Chris. He's actually going to be a sophomore at Platteville this year, coming up. Wants to be a fireman. So really cool. I can't believe that I'm blessed this much. So that's a little bit of a, I don't know if I took more than 2 minutes or not, but that's a pretty big, I guess, an overview of who I am.
Well, it sounds like you got a beautiful family there and lots of great opportunities. I want to go to the moving into the investment and finance world. If you
Yeah.
could just give us a little insight to, your dad was second generation, you're third generation, but maybe there was some time away. Were you farming at the same time, or what kind of led you into that space?
Yeah. So, what ended up happening, um, my parents, I came along and forced the issue of my parents getting married, and they've been married 46 years. So it it wasn't like they woke up one day and like, oh gosh, we got to do this. I think it was a planned thing. But as a result of that, Shay, one of the things is that my dad never ended up finishing his degree. He was actually going to be get a crop science degree at UW at Platteville as well. His junior year, he came back into the farm. My mom ended up going back to school, getting her degree, and ended up being a teacher. She retired from teaching last year. And what they stressed on me, at that point, I think because of that experience, was go get a degree. All I wanted to ever do was be a farmer, and I don't know if I was a really good athlete, but I was in my area a fairly good athlete, and so I was getting looked at a little bit for football and baseball. Ended up going to college, and in my mind at 18 was just to play, continue to play college sports, and quickly transitioned into, okay, there's things that I do need to do besides just sports. And so that impression of get your degree, do something off the farm, because the farm can always come, you can always come back to the farm. There was two things that they wanted. They wanted me to have a degree, and they didn't want me to have any resentment that, that the farm held me back or kept me in here, and not doing or experiencing something that I wanted to. And so when I graduated college, that's actually where I met my wife, Beth. And she was from the Wheaton area. She had gotten a teaching degree from the high school that she had graduated from, and so we stayed in that area for a while. And when I was in the investment world, we were handling a lot of like 401k rollovers, retirement planning. A lot of it was mutual fund based or some form of managed money type deal rather than any stocks, bonds, or anything like that.
So this
But
is maybe 2003, 2004 timeframe.
correct,
Okay.
2000. Actually, it was 2000. And I got to think about 2002. Sorry, Shay.
Yep.
And so I spent 2 years in the investment world in a suburb of Chicago called Villa Park. And I was living in the Naperville area with my wife. We had just had our first son, and so at that time, I was really, at that time, that was where I was kind of just, stretching my wings, learning a little bit more. I was coming back on the weekends during planting and harvesting season, but it wasn't full time. And I remember I had kind of a 2 year agreement with this investment rep. And he said at the end of the 2 years, I could be a rep myself, which was full commission. And I was a little bit nervous about that just because I just was starting my family, and that type of thing. So I ended up getting an offer to move into banking. And that's how I made the transition from the investment world into the banking world. Is that my 2 years were up, and no hard feelings actually. But the guy that him and I talk, a lot throughout the year at times. Really good dude that gave me a lot of kind of marketing and selling experience, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity there. But it just didn't work out. My wife and I felt like it didn't work out at the time, so it made sense to move into banking, a little bit more of a steady income, get our feet, get a foundation built and that type of thing. So I moved into that and really found that right away I just connected with business owners. And I attribute that, and I think it was really because of my farming background. I had a lot of entrepreneurial, sense to me. And, it felt like the right thing to do. And so there was about, I would say 5 years, 6 years that I was in the banking lending area in the Chicago area. I spent a little bit of time downtown in the Loop, doing some stuff with real estate and different manufacturers and service divisions. And then I moved out into the rural area in around 2006 and 2007. And that's where, I started to get introduced to the ag lending side of things. And that's where I really found my niche. And I was like, this is the right thing. I mean, I've got the farming background. I understand farmers. They understand me. We didn't have to bridge the gap of what a cow versus a heifer and a sow versus a gilt and a boar and all that. I mean, I just knew all that stuff. And so, we really hit the ground running, and I was at a really good ag bank for a long time. And I was getting more involved with the farm, but it was still more of a weekend type thing. We ended up having our second son, so I was really busy with family life and that type of stuff. And then at one point, right before um, my oldest son was going into kindergarten, I really came to my wife and I just said, hey, I love what I'm doing, but I miss the farm. I miss being a part of it. I miss being home. And I'd really, if you're open to moving, I'd really like to do it before the kids get into school, and let's figure out where our roots are. And thankfully, she was along for the ride. She loves the family, and very strong family person. Her family's great, so she understood all that, why it made sense to me. And so in 2008, 2009, we moved back to the farm. And since then, I've been, a part of the farm. Not always been full time because of the role within ag lending, but have always been full, part of the farm. And then just recently, like I said, last Friday, which was May 16th, was my last day, where I kind of hung up the banker cleats, and I've transitioned to the farm business owner and associate with AgView. So,
Oh.
I don't know if that's enough background for you,
It
Shay, for you and the listeners, but hopefully it frames up a little bit about who I am, where I've been, and where we're trying to go.
Well, and it's a great background of your expertise and the experience outside, because I think the external perspective, not only to a farm operation like your parents were hoping, the farm will always be there, you can come back.
Yep.
It gave you a lot of outside perspective and experience. It provided value back to the farm. I do need to ask you though, 2008, were you working quote unquote banker hours when you came to your wife and said, "Hey, by the way, I'd like to farm too," and now all of a sudden, like you said, you got one in kindergarten or starting school there, you're making a move, and now you're going to be working a bunch more hours. That seems like a pretty big jump, was it?
Oh my God, it was huge. Because you're right. I was banker hours. I mean, I was living in the suburbs.
Yep.
I didn't have another, I guess job operation or anything like that that was, calling me. And so when we moved out, it was kind of funny. So when we moved out, my wife, she didn't get a teaching job right away. So she ended up doing, she's a heck of an athlete. She went overseas and played for Team USA, and got hooked up with a guy that owned a pitching and hitting lessons, for like softball girls. And they were in the Aurora, Illinois area, and we were living outside Rockford. So she was driving back at nights to go give softball lessons, and I was back trying to, after I got done with my day job, I was, putting on anhydrous, planting beans, doing all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And so there was a period where, I think we both were looking at each other and going, we had a pretty good life. What did
What
we
are we
decide
doing?
to, yeah, why did we do this? And it all came at a time, where, the kids got in school, there was activities in the afternoon. And so there was a period of time where it was an adjustment. And there was a lot of growth. There was a lot of, a lot of times where we didn't see each other. It was ships passing in the night type of thing. But it's brought us to the place we are today. And we've looked back at it, and we were just talking, Sunday night about how how we've grown as people, how we've grown in our marriage, and just how happy we are. And so, it was all for a reason, and it was all good, but you're 100% right. It's funny you picked up on that, Shay, because at the time it was a major change, and a major thing for us to adapt to.
So when you came back then to the farm, or back full time, as you got started there, uh, obviously you were farming with your dad. Was your grandpa still around then?
No, he had actually he had passed when I was a junior in high school.
Okay.
And yeah, so I guess a little quick backstory. He had passed. This I'll never forget. This it was the first time we had planted wheat in, oh gosh, probably about 15 years, and he passed away right before the wheat harvest was done. It was ready to go, and we had a worn out combine, so we had to change rasp bars, on the cylinder and the concave and all that kind of stuff. We had the feeder house tore apart, and he ended up passing before we ended up putting all that back together. And I remember when the dust settled and, all the family and everybody left, Dad and I walked back in the shop again. We thought, we're never going to get this combine together. How the heck are we going to do this? And, we ended up doing it, ended up working okay, and got it together. It was a great, great harvest. And, it was kind of his way of moving forward. But then he took the farm you know, from 1995 up to where it is today, and he was the main player, and he did a lot of expansion, did quite a lot of things. Moved into a trucking company, where we hauled quite a bit in that time. He expanded our seed bean project, built the building to do the hog finishing and that type of stuff. So he was trying to diversify and was trying to set, just different types of income streams and profit centers from some of the lessons he learned from the 80s. So
Mhm.
when I came in 2008, 2009, was about the height of his, growth and sustainability. And the farm was rocking and rolling at that time. We were, but he just needed help. We were, with everything that we had going on, he needed somebody to be able to put on anhydrous and plant. At that time, we were doing no-till beans, and so somebody to kind of handle that. And it was, those two were a good, they were good applications that I could do. I could knock off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with the bank job and go plant, till 8 o'clock at night, or go put on anhydrous till 11 at night. So it was a nice fit for both of us. I was able to come in and do some of the projects that, you kind of needed a person that knew what they were doing.
Mhm.
Um, but it was also a flexible enough roles within the farm that helped me, keep my bank job and be a part of the farm. So I was really lucky that that came around.
And I bet that was such a huge relief for him because, my wife and I were just talking the other day to find someone that you can trust to go do an application or to go plant until 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
11 o'clock, because you got to be, man, one, they're few and far between. So if you can bring back a family member to be a part of that is huge. But also just having that confidence that when something goes wrong, the operator's going to stop. They're
Yeah.
not going to just keep going. And that's all the difference in the world. You would, I'm sure, stop. Hey, this needs fixed. Hey, we need to do something. Let's put a pause on it tonight. And uh,
Yep.
man, that was probably a huge, well, I guess I'd call it breath of fresh air with everything else that sounds like your dad had going on too.
Yeah, I think it really was. My wife and her mom, my mother-in-law, which I just got lucky. She's a heck of a mother-in-law. They used to joke, and because I would say they probably didn't. And I guess my point to this, Shay, is that they didn't see as a huge, probably right away, a huge breath of fresh air as my dad did. Because I was gone so much. They used to joke and say, "Man, that damn Ann Hydrus, she's always taking your time," and so they were joking about that. And I think it was my wife's way of saying I miss you and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. When she was going, gosh, anhydrous is taking your night again tonight.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, that's
yeah.
funny. I like that. I'm gonna have to use that
So
one.
yeah.
Well, okay, so I don't want to just skip 17 years because there's a lot of important stuff there. So from 2008 to 2025, you're helping in the evenings, doing, I'm sure the operation's growing, changing, shrinking, whatever's happening over that period of time. But, you get in pretty deep to the ag lending side, it sounds like, with the bank that you were involved with there. Was it the same bank for those 17 years or was there a switch?
There was a couple moves,
Yep.
and so when I started, when I came back in 2009, actually, I had taken a job in 2008. We moved, the family bought a house in 2009, and so there was a period of time where I was commuting from roughly the Yorkville area to Rockford before we moved back to the Poplar Grove area. And the bank I started off there was a bank by the name of Amcor Bank, and they had an ag division, but I wasn't hired into the ag division. I was hired into the commercial division, and that at the time that bank was going through just a little bit of struggles. They had made the choice to be into a lot of the developer type projects, and as you everybody probably remembers, the housing market crashed. A lot of things had happened. And so there was, a lot of those businesses that were upside down, similar to how farms can get, a lot of it's no different. And so at the time there, I spent 2 years at that bank working through that. And it was one of the best experiences that I had had just from a lender perspective, because, you see where things go wrong and you see how a bank, you, how they react to that. And so you get just, it's just a wonderful experience. I attribute it to it, Shay. It's kind of like, you've got a bunch of these ag lenders that either have retired or near retirement right now that talk about the 80s. That was my version of the 80s.
Yep.
I got to see that. It wasn't with ag, but it was with the investment world in construction, and it was very similar in a lot of ways to what we dealt with in the 80s, where asset values weren't worth what they were, cash wasn't coming in. It was a very similar type scenario. And so I got that experience. The bank actually ended up being sold to a larger regional bank that ended up being absorbed into its parent company from Canada. And I really missed ag lending. I was doing a little bit of ag lending prior to that, in the town that we had moved from in the Yorkville area. So I wanted to get back into ag lending, so I moved to a bank that was doing more ag lending, and I was there for about 3-4 years. And then the bank that had absorbed this, Amcor Bank, called me back and said, "Hey, we'd like you to be an ag lender for us and build a market." And so I went back and tried to do that. That was in the time frame of about 2013. So we were just coming off of that super cycle. The bank was saying, "Hey, we really want to be into row crop lending," and we just got off that super cycle, and it was tough. I felt, at the time, I got into lending because I really wanted to help people, and I just couldn't help people. And the bank, even though they had an ag presence, they were more in the dairy side of it. It was really a Wisconsin type division. And so they, in my mind, I don't know if this is 100% what had happened, but in my mind, they were very proficient with dairy because it was reoccurring monthly income that came in. They struggled to get their arms around the operating cycle of row crops, and then during a time where row crop farming was coming off of its super cycle, and it was a slow burn at that point in time, and
Mhm.
so I just felt like I couldn't really help people, and so I ended up moving to a bank that was really known in the area for row crop production. And I was there for a couple of years and really liked it. And then they ended up selling to another bank. And so, I moved about 3-4 banks in that time frame, Shay. And some of it was, just due to acquisitions, just change in, I don't want to say leadership, but direction of what, type of lending that they wanted to do. And so as I sought out ag lending, I moved in a couple different areas to some banks that I thought were still within ag lending and still where I could help some farmers. And the latest bank I've been at for 6 years. Started in 2019. Ended up building a little market in Boone County, where I'm from, and was thankful that a lot of people followed me over from the bank I was at before, and we built a nice little market here in Northern Illinois with a good bank, and they're still in existence today. Still do a lot of ag lending. They were very, gracious for me and understanding of moving and transition into the farm. So, to answer your question, there's about 3-4 banks in there that I did move to, but it was either due to some form of acquisition or temperature check where I wanted to stay in ag lending and continue to help farmers.
Yeah, I got a couple questions out of that. So you mentioned working more on the commercial business side there for a little while. I think the viewers might get some value out of your perspective on the differences in ag and ag lending versus say a construction company that you had referenced there, because they both have complexities, but I
Yep.
think we also think sometimes or get caught in a rut that agriculture is special. We're some
Yeah.
special kind of business. And maybe that's true for various reasons, but Some people view it as a lifestyle. You know, you have different cycles. You're 12 to 18 months on a turnaround from an operating cycle standpoint. What's your observation on maybe some key differences or some key lessons that a farm might take away from what you observed in, say, a construction or a different commercial business versus an ag business?
Yeah, and I think this is as corny as this sounds. We've talked about this a couple times on a podcast, but the similarities, um, profit, whether it's in any business, profit, making money and not losing it is huge. And then in the times where you do lose it, having your however much working capital or cash, however you want to call what working capital is, but working capital, it doesn't matter whether you're in a farm, a construction company, manufacturer, or anything, but working capital is the key to helping you weather those downturns. And I think those are the two biggest similarities is that, business structure and how you take top line sales growth into all the way down into net income that ends up turning to working capital, whether you're in farming, construction, whether you're a manufacturer or service company. Those are I think are the most similar things between any of those industries. Now, some key differences, obviously, you had alluded to it. The business cycles are different. So how fast you can make adjustments or how fast you can turn and
Mhm.
react to those market changes, um, is really what varies and what makes ag special. I think is that we plant a crop. I'm going to talk Northern Illinois, big ice states because that's what where you and I are from. But I mean, you plant a crop in that late April, early May time frame, and it could be 18 months after that before you end up receiving and really knowing kind of where your cash position is on that crop. Where if you're a manufacturer, it could be 60 days later. So your ability to react and to change your business model with the market takes a lot longer in ag than it does in some other industries, which I think is what makes ag a little bit more special that way. And then you could get into some of the nuances of, just cost control, what you can and can't do with your end user, that type of thing. But I think those are some of the key differences and key similarities.
Do you think farmers knowing that they have a longer cycle makes them slower to change when they do uh, take time to evaluate what's going on? You know, and what I mean by that is maybe seeing that your working capital is burning or that there's an issue either on the cost of production side or on your marketing outlook and saying, well, we need more time, or maybe we're not having a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe we're a little bit slower to react because we're in this longer cycle, or is that not true?
I think that I think yes. I mean, it's I think humans, for the most part, sometimes it's a daunting task at times to plan and stick to a plan. I mean, it takes a little effort, and not to say that I don't want to make that sound like conceited to the audience or anything, but everyday things get in the way of working on your business rather than in your business. And I think that one of the things that if you're owner of a manufacturing company, I mean, every month, if you're looking at your reconciled P&L reports, you're seeing that result so much faster than if you're doing that same thing as of 12/31 on the farm side and you're seeing it one time. So there's that saying, fail to plan, you might as well plan to fail type thing. I think it's just human nature that we all would much rather go out and do something fun in a tractor, be outside in the sun than sit in the office and plan and look at numbers. And so I think the difference of seeing the results of those numbers and how many times a year you see that probably is what gives you a false sense of security that like, okay, well, I'm still on track. I can still make this work, that type of thing, where you get a little sidetracked. And then there's some guys that do it really well. I mean, we work with some people that I mean, they're looking at that all the time. So I think that it's just a human nature thing. The perceived time and the time to fix any kind of mistake, or the time that you have to make up for what's going on. A lot of it, I've heard people say that, farmers don't like to go to Vegas and spend their money because, we're speculative all the time. There's
Yeah.
probably just a little bit of that too. So,
Hmm.
who knows? But you're right. I mean, you can get lulled to sleep at certain times of the growing season. Where if you're a manufacturer, you're seeing results every single month.
Hmm. So let's bring us up to speed to today. You were with the bank that you were at before for the last 6 years. Uh, last week, you took the leap, moved out into the consulting space. You're back in the farm operation, have a drone business involved on the seed side of things. I think maybe are the hogs still around as well?
Yep, yep. The hogs are still around for right now. Yeah,
Okay.
we've got about so we built that building in '95, and everybody's just, I guess the standard, it kind of says, you've got roughly 30 years on the slats. It's a confinement finishing building. And so we've got a major decision ahead of us here at some point in time. The building is, really good shape for its age. We've kept up with it, but when the slats need to be replaced, I think that's
Hmm.
when we're going to have to make a major decision as to, do we want to do we want to go through the expense of redoing this building? Does it make sense to do that plus build another one, or does it make sense to, figure out a different profit center? The thing that's tough with the hogs, and I'm sure any hog producer that's listening to this right now, will be able to assimilate to this, is that, you know, the costs have gone up to do all of this, whether it's to build a building, to feed the labor, everything's gone up, but we're at the same, basically the same margin. And so, your return on investment, when we built that building in '95, I think the return on investment was like 7 years, somewhere between 5 and 7 years. And if you look at, what integrators are paying for space along with what your outlay of capital is to get a building built, that's closer to 15, 20 years with a 30-year lifespan on the slats. And so, we'll have to make that decision at some point whether we still want to be in it. But I know those are a little bit tougher decisions now today than they were in '95.
For the hog producers listening, and this is hopefully this isn't too forward to me, Jeremy, but if anybody has any outlook on that as you guys make the decision, I'm sure any insight from people listening would probably be welcome there. And
Absolutely.
I would also use this point to mention too. So Jeremy, you do have an AgView Solutions email, so it's jeremy@agviewsolutions.com. So whether it's reaching out on the hog side of things, if you just want to make an introduction as a listener to Jeremy, welcome him to the team. Or if you think from listening to what we're going to talk about here next, your perspective on the banking or financial outlook for the business, or if you think Jeremy is a fit for working with you in your operation, just reach out, shoot Jeremy an email, if nothing else. And that's kind of where I wanted to steer us here is as you join the team, obviously there's a lot of value with your background and experience, as well as just knowing how AgView Solution works, your familiarity and use of Profit Manager, and then your outlook on your experience with the egg lending. What do you feel, I know, but what do you feel is what's going to bring the most value to the AgView Solutions clients, to people that we work with, people on the podcast as we move forward here? What does Jeremy bring to the table that is going to bring massive value to the audience?
Yeah, a great question, Shay. And I think that the easiest answer is that, I think I can be, that recovering banker that anybody can ask questions to a recovering banker that they don't want to ask their real banker,
Yeah.
and I think that's the biggest value, or the easiest way to summarize that big value is to say, there's a lot of times where, you go to the banker, and I have even felt this way too with my bankers, that, you go in there and you're like, gosh, it seems like it's such almost like a job interview process, or, kind of, flirting, you're, dating, that you're like, gosh, I don't know, always want to show my true cards because, I don't know how that person is going to perceive that. And I think that, we can talk all about, the business and the financials, and we can run debt service coverage ratios and debt to asset ratios. But I think that the biggest thing is it can be that I bring is that it's a non-threatening environment to ask a banker all the questions that you're afraid to ask your banker.
Hmm.
And then how to propose and to go through all those concerns and questions and how to tee that up the right way so that you get your point across to your current banker. And I think that that's probably some of the things that I think I bring to the table because all of us that are in AgView, I think we're all really strong, from a financial perspective, from a income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, planning, all of that, team health. I mean, I think we're all pretty proficient in that area. And so we all have our little things that we little niches we have, and I think that's my niche is that ask me the questions you're afraid to ask your banker, and we'll figure out how to put those in the right light for the real banker that you're going to go see.
That's a great summary. And for clarity, you're not continuing on the egg lending side or banking. So
No, no,
this is an excellent outlook. And I would tell all the listeners too, I'm not afraid of my banker. So if he's listening, I'm not afraid of my banker, but I personally approached you 2 months ago with a decision that we're looking to make in our operation, which is, a little bit out there. It's kind of a different way
yeah,
to approach it. And just to run through this scenario that I had in my head and say, hey, Jeremy, is this, what do you think of this? What's your
yeah,
honest opinion? And so many of you listening have multiple businesses that you're running. We have tight margins. You're looking to grow the operation at a time period when it feels like, damn it, I don't know if I should be growing right now. And
yeah,
having another set of eyes is pretty crucial on that. So I agree 100%, for anybody listening that feels, that outside perspective would bring value to operation would be huge. And I also think too, just from knowing the numbers inside and out and the number of balance sheets and cash flows or lack thereof that you've seen over
yeah,
the years probably provides an excellent perspective. I know you're working with a lot of people on Profit Manager as well, getting cost of production dialed in, helping people feel comfortable with that side of things. I think there's just tremendous potential that when I look at the AgView Solutions team, and this is one of the coolest things for whether you've worked with us or thinking about working with us or just have listened to the podcast for a long time, our background and our foundation between the five of us now, Joe and Andy, you, Jeremy, and Chris and I, there's someone that has an answer to the question that you have or has
yeah,
experienced it, whether it's the transition or how do we reintegrate or where do we go for additional cash flow into the business. And I think, well, I know you're a huge asset to what that looks like moving forward. And, I would say too that maybe the different area that you would provide is we will be doing a lot of, meetings together uh,
yeah,
from the consulting point. This has kind of happened organically. I don't think Chris and I really anticipated this as we added Joe and Andy and you as associates, but the interaction of you guys working together with clients is now
yeah,
bringing 5 times the value to that client than even just one of us working together. And there's situations where, maybe it's transition planning or business structuring that one person does make sense in those less complex scenarios. But there's also huge value to having two people there, even if one is virtual, to provide perspective. It gives a backup to clients that, hey, if Shay gets hit by a beer truck, Jeremy's there to step in and help coach through, consult through what you have going on in your operation. So I don't know. I said a lot there, but I just think I'm excited for what that could be with the collaboration amongst us internally in the team to continue to provide value. And I would hope, again, I don't want to be too forward here. I would hope you would be open to doing more of these podcasts as we move forward and just having conversations around kind of what you're seeing as you
Yep.
work with people, as well as hey, it's July 15th. What do I need to be thinking about from a cash
Yep.
perspective or from a business planning perspective?
Yep. No, absolutely. I've been a part of AgView Solutions does the peer groups, and if you haven't experienced that, you really need to, because it's extremely powerful. We all say, like, you can't hardly describe it, but I think that between the five of us now, it's almost like a mini peer group. The different perspective that you get of a peer group, we've got on a little bit smaller organic scale of just the AgView team. So that's kind of how I look at it
Yeah.
with that. Is that we've got so many different experiences that you're right. There's somebody that can find either an answer or a similar situation that's happened with a client, borrower, friend, neighbor, something that we can apply to your business.
And as always, not just with the consulting side, but with the podcast, our purpose is to provide value and perspective to your business. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. That's why we bring value to your farm operation, to your agricultural business, whatever you have going on. We want to provide value through the tools and resources and experience that we have, and a background and some perspective, but just to be able to pick up the phone and maybe someone's working with me or someone's working with Chris, but they're like, hey, I have a question for Jeremy, can I give Jeremy a call?
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, anything else that I didn't hit on, or that you're really excited about that we should have been talking on? What's on your mind as we close out here, Jeremy?
Well, I'll tell you this. What's on my mind is I'm just excited to be a part of the AgView team. I told Chris this, and I really feel this. I got to go to not quite a year ago. I got to go to a consulting meeting, and when I got done with that meeting, I just said to Chris, I said, it's really exciting to be on the other side of the table rather than be the banker. And I'm not saying that all banks are pessimistic, but there's a little bit of, is that going to work?
Hmm.
And the consulting meetings are so much more in AgView is so much more about how do we make this work? This can work. We're optimistic. How can we make this work? And between you, Andy, Joe, Chris, and anybody that I've worked with, within the AgView team, it's just a breath of fresh air to be on that side of optimism, and I'm just excited to be a part of it. So, you got the AgView family is a heck of a family, and I'm just honored to be a part of it. So, thank you, Shay.
Absolutely.
Thank.
And like we said, Jeremy, it's Jeremy at eggviewsolutions.com. You're on the website now. We got your beautiful headshot up there. Um, and you're going to be hearing a lot more, Jeremy. For those of you that will be working with this summer on summer meetings, Jeremy's going to be tagging along to quite a few of those. And yeah, just again, grateful to have you on the team, Jeremy. So thank you so much for giving us an introduction to who you are, and looking forward to the years ahead.
Likewise, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Shay.
And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the AgView Pitch. We will catch you next time.